when I give you the example of the US, 1776 was the time when it came into being. So from that perspective, it may appear that it's an older nation than India in terms of the constitution. But as you have very correctly pointed out, I think Shreyan pointed out that the constitution is an immaterial thing, right? Because the people are the ones who give the constitution. The people are the ones who decided that we should have a constitution which should say so and so and so things, right? But before that, before the constitution came into being, we were already fighting for our independence, right? We had about 200 years that people were fighting for independence from the British rule, at least for 100 years or so. So from that perspective, when the freedom fighters and the revolutionaries were fighting against the foreign rule, at that time there was no constitution, right? So does it mean that they were fighting for nothing? So for them, India as a nation, India as an identity already existed. If that only existed after 1950, then what were they fighting for? So that's the reason why we have to make a very clear distinction over here. I know that many of you have been taught in schools that a country is only a country can only be considered as a country if it has a constitution, right? That's what you have been taught in schools. But honestly, if you look at it, that's a very Western type of lens. You look at it from a Western framework. That's not how nations have always functioned. So let's talk about India, for example. Now, if you look at India as a nation, it has always existed since millennia. People have always looked at this landmass as one nation. It could be called as Hind. It could have been called as Aryavrat or Bharat or whatever. It has always been considered as one landmass or one country as such. And the most important point that we have to remember over here, that as one of you already mentioned over here, that probably that, it was not that at all times India was geographically united. There could have been many monarchs ruling over this country. There might have been about 30, 40, 50 different kings ruling over India. That could be possible. But the most important point about our unity is its cultural unity, the unity of its civilization. As Shreyan very correctly put over here, and then also even Shevi also added up, the unity that we see is in terms of its culture. So if you look at Sanskrit, for example, which is the mother of all Indian languages, then you look at other points like the Vedas, the Vedic scriptures, then devotion to different forms of God, whichever place you go, either north, south, east, or west, everybody's worshipping the same, same forms. I mean, everybody's worshipping Krishna, Ram, Durga, Shiv, and so on. And then you have that unity in terms of it's our Hindu identity, which is found throughout India from north to south, east to west. So culturally, our unity is much more deeper than any kind of geographical unity. That is the very important point. So from our cultural unity point of view, this country is at least 10,000 years old. From our cultural unity point of view, our country is at least 10,000 years old, if not more. If you look at our Vedic scriptures, they talk about millions of years. But if we don't speak about millions of years also, it's like at least 10,000 years old. And if we talk about let's say, for example, you talk about the Vedic scriptures, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, all of them are speaking about the geography which is of present day India, right from the Himalayas in the north, right up to the south, where we see Kanyakumari and the Indian Ocean, which is the Ganga Sagar, which is called as the Indian Ocean. So basically, what we are seeing is, if you look at from that perspective, our civilizational unity is extremely ancient, right? That is the very first part we must remember. Now, talking about, coming back to even the point of, can we say that before the Arabs or before the British, there was no person who was ruling over a united India, or geographically? Even that is quite wrong. If you look at history, for example, you have the person called as Mahapadmanand, and after that you had Chandragupta Maurya, the Mauryan dynasty. So Mauryan dynasty encompassed almost 80% of present day India. In fact, even much wider, because the Mauryan dynasty stretched all the way till Afghanistan and also east, almost touching to Myanmar. Only in the south, it did not go extreme south. But in the point is that it was a very extensive and a very vast empire. Similarly, the Gupta Empire also was a very big one. So even from that yardstick, if we say that were there any ancient Hindu rulers who ruled over India as the one geographical unity? The answer is yes, there were. So British were not the first, the Mughals were not the first. So that is a very important point that we must remember, that even if we talk about, okay, forget about the culture part, forget about the civilization part, even in terms of geographical unity, was India ruled as one unit, as one political unit before the British, before the Muslims? Yes, it was by the Mauryans 2,500 years back. So from that perspective, we are already very clear about it. And Chandragupta Maurya, when he ruled the country, he ruled it under the guidance of Chanakya. And Chanakya had written what is called as Chanakya Niti, which sets about the rules and regulations of how the country should be ruled. It could be considered as a kind of constitution. They may not use the word constitution, but it can be considered as a constitution. So from that perspective, also we can see that even geographical unity is already very deep inside. So again, we come to the same part. As I said, after some time, as we know that India became divided, a lot of foreign invaders came. First from the Greeks came, and then from the Greeks we had the various Central Asians, Arabs, and then of course the Europeans, from Portuguese to British and so on. So whichever invaders came to this country, it is not as if the people just sat down and did nothing. They fought against these invaders. Sometimes they were not successful, but sometimes they were successful. But the concept of defining this country as a land of dharma, a land which has to be protected. So you had many saints, many small kings, and many people who worked, who galvanized the people to fight against the foreign invaders. So again, the same thing. If India did not exist, if the concept of India did not exist, or this country did not exist, then what were they fighting for? That's a very important point. If it didn't exist, then it doesn't make a difference, right? If there is no concept of nationhood, then what were people fighting for? So that's a very important point that we have to keep it in mind, that even though geographical unity may not have been there all the time, but civilizational unity has always been there since time immemorial. When you look at other countries' books which talk about India, for example, they always speak about India as one nation. When they talk about China, you talk about the Arabs, the Greeks, they define this land as Indica according to Greeks, or Aryavrat according to some other people, or Hind according to the Arabs, and the Chinese people called it as Into. From that it became Yanto, right? So for them, India was all, irrespective of whether it was one political unit or not. But in terms of cultural unity, it was always the same. So today, let's say, for example, today the most famous temple in this country is the temple of Tirupati in Andhra Pradesh. It is considered, it's supposed that there are more pilgrims and visitors to this temple than even to the Vatican or to Makkah, Medina, right? So many people visit this temple. This temple is located in South Bharat. But when you look, I've been to Tirupati a couple of times, you will find that there are people from all over India who visit this temple, all over India. Similarly, if you go to Vaishno Devi in Jammu, you will also find that people from all over the country are going to this place. When you go to Varanasi, Hardwar for Ganga Snan, you will find that people from all over the country are coming over here to take a bath over there. Similarly, Kumbh Mela, which takes place, as you know, once in 3 years in 4 different cities of Ujjain, Hardwar, Prayag, and Nasik. You will find that at times there are about 50 million people who attend this kind of Kumbh Mela. So these people are coming from every single corner of the country. Sometimes they may not speak Hindi, they may not speak the local language. But what is it that draws them to these kind of places? So that is the kind of unity that we have. It may not have existed as a political unity all the time. There may be a lot of differences, but this cultural oneness, this feeling that we belong to the same dharma, the same religion, you can call it, but same dharma, Hindu dharma, that unity is far more stronger than any other piece of paper which may be held sacred. So that is a very important point. This unity, this cultural aspect of our country being one, that is a very important ingredient of our of our culture. And that is what we have to remember. Nothing else is going to matter otherwise. If you talk about constitution, they will come and go. It's only made by a human being, right? But this culture, it has been existing since 10,000 years at least, and will surely exist till time, like, immemorial.